Okay, we should be live and just got done watching a couple of bad games of football. And let me rephrase that. I mean, I watched some of those games, but not going to lie, they were not intriguing at all. So I did not get to finish either of them. Decided to read a solid book instead. But going to be happy to go through and talk about what we have for week 16. Hopefully we get some better games. Hopefully we don't have practice squad quarterbacks out there. Cozy Solo coming out says that he hates Cooper Kupp. Brandon says Sony Michel running back 1. My God, that's one thing that I owe a lot of people an apology with. I went through and I said that Sony Michel was someone that was going to be operating in a committee with Darrell Henderson, but Darrell Henderson was the guy that you wanted to start in that backfield. Clearly that was so damn wrong. Let's go through, and Chris says he's in the draft. Happy to have you in this draft. And yeah, if you have not joined yet, actually, this may fill before I can even send the link out in the live chat. So I apologize with that. Yeah, so this draft is already filled. We've sent this over there on Patreon. We sent that on Discord before the live chat. I apologize for anybody wanting to get into this draft. You know, we're going to continue to do a ton of these drafts. I mean, if you want to get in, just make sure you sign up for Underdog Fantasy right now. That way, next time we go live, you can make sure that you are ready to come in. Vertical coming out says drop DK Metcalf. Yeah, that's another thing I owe people an apology for. Once Tyler Lockett was ruled out that game, we were saying that based on, the target volume that you had concentrated between both Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, and if you remove Tyler Lockett, who was seeing a solid 26% of his team's targets, that was going to be going over directly towards DK Metcalf. Yeah, I guess that did not happen. I guess we owe y'all definitely an apology for that. Despite me being an idiot, please make sure you go down there, drop a like on the live stream. Just set that to subscriber only. Let's show this screen real quick. We're going to be drafting at the 104 in this draft. And let me make sure that we can share this properly. Okay, so of course you're going to see Jonathan Taylor go at the 101. I mean, if Jonathan Taylor was not picked at the 101, you would have to probably just boot that person from ever drafting with you again because they have no idea what they are doing. Now, Alex says he got the highest score on all 3 playoff teams. That is crazy. Happy to hear that, my friend. What I'm excited about is it looks like we are going to be advancing in the next round in those $250 big dog drafts and a couple spots on Underdog Fantasy, which I'm excited about because there's a real chance for $100,000. We just have to get past this next round. So there are going to be 8 teams in the round. And out of those 8 teams, 2 teams are getting tickets to go forward. So we have, if my math is correct, I believe a 50% chance. Yeah, because we have something along those lines. Nonetheless, let's go through and let's look at who we're going to take here. And we're just going to take the running back that we're confident with the workload at the 104. Y'all know how we are doing this by now. And Jack coming out says, who should I start this week, Antonio Brown or CeeDee Lamb? Okay, so we have a video coming out tomorrow morning on our wide receiver rankings for week 16. I don't want to give this away right now. I'll do it. Antonio Brown's our wide receiver 3 this week. Operating under the assumption that you do not have Mike Evans, and obviously you're not going to have Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown is going to be my wide receiver 3. We know that Tampa's going to be able to move the ball down the field. Now, no, they may no longer be, the best offense in the NFL, but maybe they're instead a top 10 offense, and everything gets funneled through Antonio Brown. And I know a lot of people are going to think that's really aggressive, but with Antonio Brown, if you're looking at a per game basis so far this season, he's the wide receiver 6 on a per game basis. Now, yes, it's a small sample. I believe the sample is actually only 5 games, but still, I'm not going to feel too bad about having Antonio Brown with no Chris Godwin and no Mike Evans as my wide receiver 3. Hayden coming out says, do you think Kupp will have a similar season next year if he stays healthy, or do you think this will be a one-season thing? Love the content, by the way. No, thank you so much for supporting the channel, my friend. And yeah, Cooper Kupp obviously going off tonight, and I know people are probably going to hate to hear me say this. And yes, we just passed on Cooper Kupp at the 104, and we'll talk about our strategy in this draft a little bit later on. I'm sure the majority of y'all know that by now. But with Cooper Kupp, this is a wide receiver. He is definitely, right there in line of being the fantasy football MVP this season. He's averaged about 26 fantasy points per game. And I will tell you right now, I'm no mathematician, but Cooper Kupp is not going to average 26 fantasy points per game next year. Devontae Adams was at 25 points per game. I mean, in 2019, the wide receiver one, Michael Thomas, was at 23.9 points per game. So for Cooper Kupp to be at this level, it is very much unsustainable, but that does not mean he can't be the wide receiver one. He can come out here and he can score, 80% of what he did this season, and he would still be in contention as a top 3 wide receiver. So then Cooper Kupp is definitely going to be a top 3 wide receiver next year, probably going to be the wide receiver one. He'll definitely be going as the wide receiver one in drafts, as you're seeing right now. But for him to score 26 points per game again, I think that's probably not going to happen. Okay. So Lucky Pippin says you'll go Antonio Brown over Keenan Allen. Yes, Antonio Brown and Keenan Allen are actually ranked back-to-back for me here. And I know a lot of people are probably a little confused on why we are getting in a 2022 draft, just in case you haven't heard. And I definitely have to give out a disclaimer because that ticker on the bottom is no longer accurate. These are drafts on Underdog Fantasy. And I know a lot of people are probably thinking, Mason, you're crazy. Why the hell would you get into a real money fantasy football draft for 2022 right now? Trust me, I get it. It is definitely looking dumb on the surface, but this is a best ball league. This is not a regular fantasy football league where you go through and you go and work the waiver wire every single day next year. We're not going to be able to pick up players or drop players in this format next season. Instead, what's actually going to happen is your rosters lock after the draft, and you don't have to submit a starting lineup either. You don't submit a starting lineup. The automatic best starting lineup for you gets submitted at the end of every week. So the only time commitment that you have is, do you want to go through and do you want to check the standings on a week-to-week basis, which I'm a diehard sicko, and I'm going to be in hundreds of these drafts and hundreds of these leagues because we had a lot of success with these last season. But I will probably be going through and checking the standings and such, but you don't have to if you don't want to. It's no time commitment at all. I will say, let me give out a massive disclaimer here. Right now, for 2022 drafts, Underdog Fantasy isn't just offering 2022 drafts. You can get into weekly drafts. If you want to draft a team just for week 16, you can do that. If you want to go through and draft a team for the NFL playoffs, you can do that as well. They have a ton of different draft contests. I'm really focusing in on these 2022 drafts right now, because I love looking at that long-term outlook. I really want to transition over to Dynasty for this offseason. I think this will make me a little bit of a sharper Dynasty fantasy football player if we have an idea of how to view these players for 2022. Not only that, but it's just more fun. But when you're signing up for these 2022 drafts, there are going to be 3 different price point options. There are going to be $5 drafts, $10 drafts, and $25 drafts. And please, please, please do not sign up for the $25 drafts. That would be very much a waste of money, in my opinion. Now, of course, if you want to get into the $25 underdog drafts later on in the offseason, that's when you do it. Because later on this offseason, once the rookies are imported, Underdog Fantasy is going to have their special tournaments that you can go through and you can look at those price points of the $250 leagues, the $25 leagues, more $5 leagues, if those are the tournaments that you want. But my advice for you is if you want to have some fun, get in these drafts right now. Do the $5 drafts. That way you can get better, and that way you can really hone your skills and look at a bunch of different roster constructions and try some different things out. That way when they open up the large field contest, those $25 tournament leagues, you're going to be better than the field, and you didn't have to lock up a lot of that money already to do so. Instead, you save that money for those tournaments. And of course, you can find the link to join Underdog Fantasy in the comments section in the description of the video. You can find all that stuff there. And when you use promo code FLOCK, they'll match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. And I know we are having 3 picks that are not going to be popular in a row here. We're going to go Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones, and David Montgomery. And you know, I am always the person that really looks to take one running back at the beginning like Austin Eckler and then hammer in some wide receivers. I would have probably gone, if this was closer to the season, Austin Eckler, CeeDee Lamb, and Jamar Chase. But when we are so far out from the year right now and we don't know what the running back depth charts are going to look like across the NFL, I'm going to be very hesitant to go through and pass up on those running backs with guaranteed touches early, because by the time you get to round 7 and round 8, you're going to have players like Ramondre Stevenson already drafted. You're going to have guys, flying off the board at the running back position. I'll be more comfortable finding my wide receivers later on. JN coming out says, let's go. Too bad Mason blocked my other big dog. Cost me $500. Thanks for all that I've learned, even though it's luck-based. Hopefully I can advance one more to the final countdown. Hook 'em horns. Go Mighty Mullet. Yes, sir. Hook 'em horns. Happy to see that JN was able to go through. JN went through and he drafted 4 $250 teams on Underdog in the Big Dog tournament. That's the tournament with the $100,000 on top that you actually have a real shot to get to if you have one of those teams advancing this far. It's not like the puppy drafts. If you're in the puppy drafts, if you're in Best Ball Mania, that's like a lottery ticket. That's like a scratch off. I mean, the field is so large, but those $250 Big Dog drafts, I mean, you have a real shot at this point. And he actually drafted 4 of those teams, and 2 of those teams made it to the first round of the tournament. He almost had both of them advance, and I kind of went through, took that last spot from him in one of those leagues, and we ended up advancing our team instead. Jay, and I'll say, I do not feel bad about it. I am happy to have my team in there. Of course, happy for you, though. Okay, so let's go through. And real quick, if you have not dropped a like on the live stream, please, please, please make sure you go down there and drop a like on the stream ASAP. Yeah, JN in this draft as well goes Mixon, Nick Chubb, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I'll say really quick, I think that these San Francisco 49ers players like Deebo Samuel going at the 210, honestly, I think this is probably, I don't want to say probably, this is definitely just a reach in my opinion. Now, I know Deebo is fantastic this season, and trust me, I am the world's #1 Trey Lance fan from a fantasy football standpoint, given the fact that Trey Lance is very similar to Jalen Hurts and that he has that elite rushing upside. And even if he's not great from a real life standpoint with the passing volume, based on the rushing upside alone, he could be elite for fantasy purposes. I think that Trey Lance comes in, he probably limits the passing volume in San Francisco. With Deebo Samuel, if you look at the usage over the past month, it's a lot closer to what you've historically seen in his NFL career compared to what you had earlier this season. So honestly, I am not necessarily a fan of taking Deebo Samuel ahead of guys like CeeDee Lamb, Keenan Allen, Jamar Chase. I prefer all those wide receivers over Deebo Samuel. I prefer A.J. Brown over Deebo Samuel as well, going at the 404. I am Dreams. This is going to be Isaac in the chat. He goes through and he gets the Kansas City Chiefs trifecta stack going Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, and clearly he was going through and planning on this. It's interesting to take Elijah Mitchell over Clyde Edwards-Helaire if you're planning on that stack already. That would have been very interesting. Waller at the 405. We took Waller, I believe, almost at this same exact pick in last night's draft, and I really liked it. Yeah, Isaac coming out already saying, look at the Chiefs stack. Yeah, Isaac, we just covered that. I was wondering why you didn't decide to go through and take Clyde Edwards-Helaire there. Okay, so now let's go through Kyle Pitts at the 407. Let's pivot this back over. Okay, so another big thing if you're drafting these best ball teams on Underdog Fantasy, you need to know that they do not have a fantasy football playoff. You're not going to be in the fantasy football playoffs, and instead, you're actually going to be looking at who just scores the most points through the entire season. Those best ball... God dang, Tanner taking Calvin Ridley from us. I really thought we were going to go Calvin Ridley here. Do we, quote unquote, reach for our guy? You know what? Based on a couple other teams going running back heavy, I'm going to do it. We're going to see how this pans out if we decide to take Travis Etienne here. I know a lot of people aren't going to like Travis Etienne. We are taking him significantly ahead of his ADP. It is what it is. But nonetheless, on Underdog Fantasy, those leagues that we're talking about being in the playoff tournament, those are the tournaments. If you're just going through and getting into a 2022 draft right now, this draft is not going to have a playoff component to it. It's just going to be who can score the most points throughout the entire season. So looking at someone like Chris Godwin is probably going to be a player that you're looking to avoid, given the fact that with Chris Godwin, this is a wide receiver that could potentially miss some time at the beginning of the year, drastically lowering his value that you would actually have if he misses, say, 3 weeks. Okay, so yeah, no, a beat on coming out says Goddard coming up clutch. Yeah, happy to see that Dallas Goedert did have a big game. Now, at this point, whenever we take our 4 running backs in a row, we are going to be in a position where we can just hammer in wide receivers after this. And based on some of the quarterbacks that were, and tight ends, really, I mean, there were a couple tight ends later on in the draft yesterday that I was looking at going, oh my God, I would really prefer to take a tight end here, but because we took them early in last night's draft, I really thought that we were kind of handicapped. Like if we can go through and say, really like this value of Darren Waller, really like this value of Kyle Pitts, but then you go through the rest of the draft and you go, hell, I mean, there's even greater tight end values in the double-digit rounds, whereas wide receiver and running back definitely dry up. I mean, that's kind of why you want to get your reps under your belt here. You want to go through, you want to just try to feel out the draft board, find a way that you can go through and navigate it. Isaac coming out says, Akers coming off an Achilles tear, and I trust Mitchell over Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I feel like Elijah Mitchell has a stronger hold on his backfield job. It's interesting because if you're looking at Elijah Mitchell, this team doesn't have a ton of resources to be able to go through and to replace him. Yet at the same time, they don't necessarily have a ton invested into Elijah Mitchell himself. I mean, being a 5th round pick. No longer in my dynasty days. If you would have asked me back in like 2018 from a dynasty fantasy football perspective, Mason, what are we doing with the Denver Broncos backfield, which I always like to compare San Francisco to here, and that Denver Broncos backfield back in 2018, it was a very comparable situation. I mean, you had Royce Freeman, the 3rd round draft pick out of Oregon, the guy that everybody was going for in dynasty, very similar to Trey Sermon out of Ohio State in the 3rd round this year. I mean, that player completely flaming out his rookie season. And then you had the guy coming from nowhere that really had no level of team investment. I mean, having a strong start. Okay. I think if we would have decided to take a wide receiver in the last round, we would have taken Kyler Murray here. I think this is great value on Kyler, but since we passed on wide receiver through the first 4, we can't afford to do so. If this was a team that was drafting for the fantasy football playoffs, I would take Chris Godwin. Given the fact that we're not drafting for the playoffs and instead we're drafting for who can score the most points throughout the year, I'm going to take Mike Evans. But yeah, going back to what we were talking about in 2018, I was the guy going through and saying, you know what, let's go through and buy low on Royce Freeman, buy low on Royce Freeman, buy low on Royce Freeman, sell high on Phillip Lindsay, sell high on Phillip. I was screaming that from the rooftops. I'm not going to be the guy this year telling people to go through and buy low on Trey Sermon. We've learned our lesson. When those rookies flame out in spectacular fashion, it's going to be really hard for them to overcome it. Very similar to what you're seeing with someone like Terrace Marshall this year in Carolina. Very similar to what you saw, I mean, at another position, say like N'Keal Harry in New England in 2019, flaming out as a 1st round wide receiver. A lot of people thought it was an intriguing spot to go through and buy low, but if you fail without an excuse of an injury and you fail in spectacular fashion, it's so hard to come back from that. A12345 coming out, says set the 2 quarterback lineup team. Okay, so we already got quarterback out of the way. Running back, Najee Harris, Elijah Mitchell, Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders. Let me look at the official stat line that we had on Miles Sanders. Obviously, Miles Sanders coming out, and I mean, based on what I saw, he looked dynamic. He had a couple big runs, and he helped us out on some of those tournament teams on Underdog. Yeah, 131 rushing yards. The 15 rushing attempts from Jordan Howard does look a little bit skewed because Jordan Howard was getting a lot of those touches, I mean, near the end of the game when it was pretty much over here. So I think you really want to get excited about Miles Sanders. Now he gets 2 receptions out of the backfield, not expecting a ton of involvement in the receiving game when you have a rush-first quarterback, but beyond this, I think we go Najee Harris. Probably still go Najee Harris. And you know what? We're not going to be able to go Elijah Mitchell, given the fact that it looks like Elijah Mitchell's probably going to miss that game on Thursday. So most likely Najee Harris and Miles Sanders. And then at wide receiver, Darnell Mooney, Odell Beckham Jr., Christian Kirk, AJ Green, George Kittle. Okay, so it sucks because maybe missing out on Tyreek Hill. Now, if Tyreek Hill were to play, I think we're actually going to go through and we're going to play Tyreek Hill and Christian Kirk. Now, if Tyreek Hill misses, instead, I think we're going to go with Christian Kirk and Odell Beckham Jr. And then for our flex spot, we're going to be going with Elijah Mitchell if he is to play, or Javonte Williams if Elijah Mitchell is not to play. You already have Kittle figured out. Now, the Phillies defense and the Chargers defense, let's go through and let's check out the matchups. I believe you have Philadelphia going up against New York. Let me double check that. Yes, so Phillies going up against New York. Obviously, that's going to be a fantastic spot. And Chargers are going up against Houston, I believe. Let me double check that as well, though. I think you could be fine with either. You're probably going to be playing the Los Angeles Chargers defense against Houston, given the fact that with the Chargers, I mean, this is probably a better defensive unit in a comparable matchup. Both are completely fine, though. Yeah, so Miles Sanders going into 604. Great value on Miles Sanders. Isaac, I got to give you some crap here as well. I don't think I would have taken either Cordell Patterson or Tony Pollard over Miles Sanders, to be honest. But yeah, you got a little bit of a running back run happening here. That's why we decided to go with someone like Travis Etienne back in the 4th. Not necessarily thinking that Travis Etienne's a much better option than some of those elite level quarterbacks like Josh Allen or Kyler Murray, but it's more so just looking at the running backs that are going to be available to us in later rounds. I like to go through and look at the running backs that we could have now. I mean, this is why I think you have to get your running backs early when we're drafting at this point of the season. It's those New England guys, Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, Darrell Henderson. And then at wide receiver, you have guys like Amari Cooper, Devonta Smith. I mean, it's just significantly better. Now, Amari Cooper off the board here. I think, you know what? I think we're going to go a little bit out of ADP. We're going to take a player that's 15 picks behind Adam Thielen in ADP. Let's go through and let's take Michael Thomas. I mean, I know this is a player, obviously, with a ton of downside. I think he has some upside as well. Batman Gaming coming out says, missed the playoffs, but ready for the next season. Also found your channel. Also, avoided having to wear a dress at the draft party next year. Happy to hear that, my friend. And hell yeah, I hope that we can get you in some dynasty leagues with us this offseason, to be honest. And Austin coming out says A.J. Dillon or Aaron Jones at their underdog ADP. I find myself taking Dillon in the 6th almost every time. I agree with you. I think if you're talking about pure value, A.J. Dillon in the 6th round is going to be much better than Aaron Jones in the 2nd. I know a lot of people are saying, well, Mason, you just took Aaron Jones in the 2nd here. While that may be true, we decided to just more so take the running back there. If we had A.J. Dillon falling to us in that same range in the 6th, we would have been going A.J. Dillon as well. It's just hard to know exactly when Dillon's going to fall, especially in this draft room, when every single time we get an underdog draft going with the listeners of this channel, I know they definitely are a lot higher on A.J. Dillon than his ADP. And Eber coming out says, hey Mason, thank you for your daily grind. No, thank you so much for supporting the channel. It says, first time playing and I learned a lot from your channel. My PO match went so bad. Only Keenan Allen delivered. Still a good experience. We'll play in more leagues next season. Happy to hear that, my friend. I am sorry to hear that your season is coming to the end though. And I'll say fantasy football, at least the fantasy football playoffs, are usually a lot better than this year. I mean, this year I think probably skewed a lot of things for people who are just now getting into it. All right, I promise you it's going to be more fun down the road. I promise you. Adam Thielen finally goes off the board at the 702. Great pick there with Adam Thielen at the 702. And a reminder, we've gone running back early. We decided to go Eckler, Aaron Jones, David Montgomery, Travis Etienne for some guaranteed touches. At wide receiver, we have Mike Evans and Michael Thomas. Okay, so Luke is up. Luke was in the draft last night. He's gone. Okay, he goes Chase Edmonds. Honestly, that helps us out. Brandon Ayuk was a clear tier ahead of other people. And I know people are probably going to be saying, well, Mason, didn't you just say that Deebo Samuel was being overdrafted earlier because Trey Lance doesn't necessarily fit the playing style of having your wide receivers with a ton of volume? Yes, we did say that, but we were talking about Deebo Samuel in the 2nd round versus Brandon Ayuk in the 7th. So yeah, I'm going to be willing to take the bet on Brandon Ayuk going into year 3 in the 7th round. Almost consider taking him over Michael Thomas in the 6th. Okay, so Coach White Pill coming out says, Thomas, he's always hurt. Yes, with Michael Thomas, obviously you're getting a massive injury discount. If Michael Thomas was always healthy, Michael Thomas would be a 1st round draft pick. But because, I mean, he spent this entire season on the IR and didn't come close to playing, you're getting him in the 6th, sometimes 7th. So you're having that injury discount baked in. I mean, if we are going through and taking Michael Thomas in the 1st round, where his points per game may indicate he should go, then you can come through and you can say, Mason, you bum. Don't you know that this player can't stay healthy? That's a fair point. But if you're taking him at a point where his, injury risk is already baked into that draft price, I think it's almost a moot point. Okay, so Darnell Mooney at the 708, Gronk at the 707. And see, let me know what y'all think of this strategy. Like, I think going through and looking at all our picks, I don't think I would change a single one. I'm going Eckler over Kupp. I'm going Aaron Jones over Deebo, CeeDee Lamb, Keenan Allen. I'm going David Montgomery over Jamar Chase. Keep in mind, if it's closer to the beginning of the season and we have an idea of how the running back depth charts are going to shape up, then I'm going to be taking Jamar Chase over David Montgomery. Then I'm going to be taking CeeDee Lamb over Aaron Jones, being able to safely identify the running backs that are in plus scenarios with upside and definitely have a low floor. But, you can take your shots on guys like Zach Moss, Devin Singletary, Leonard Fournette, James Conner, Chase Edmonds, and all those players that are going to be on good offenses and unclear depth charts. But right now, to go through and to take someone like James Conner in the 6th round when he doesn't even have a contract for next year, that's going to be something that I'm definitely looking to avoid, and I'd prefer being able to grab someone like Michael Thomas later on in the draft. Okay, so Live Creation says he made the playoffs in all 9 leagues. I'm in. Happy to hear that, my friend. Congrats. I'll say one thing, especially this season. I almost say this every year, but getting to the fantasy football playoffs, that is where 99% of the skill comes in. Once you get to the fantasy football playoffs, it's very similar to March Madness. There's so much volatility. It's a week-to-week game that, quote-unquote, winning the playoffs, I don't want to say it's more luck than skill, but way more luck gets introduced to it. So that's why, if you play in a Flock Patreon Dynasty League, if you look at our payouts, they're very flat. It's like 300 for first place, 200 for second place, 100 for third place. Whereas I know a lot of other people go through and they would instead have 500 for first and 100 for second and nothing for third. I don't necessarily think that's how you should do it. I think you should be rewarding the teams who had a good regular season and were able to go a little bit deeper into the playoffs and kind of reward all those owners rather than maybe just the one owner who kind of got hot at the end of the year when he needed to. Great pick with Dak Prescott at the 806. Great pick with Stafford at the 807. Okay, so now Dallas Goedert at the 808. I like that pick as well. We're going to continue to take a wide receiver. I mean, I think that Chase Claypool is actually going to be one of the last wide receivers in this tier for me. With Chase Claypool, we'll be going into year 3 this next season. I know that he doesn't have a quarterback. He didn't have a quarterback this year either. And at the same time, I mean, you should have no Juju Smith-Schuster, who's going to be a free agent this offseason. So we're going to take Chase Claypool here at the 809. We have 4 running backs, 4 wide receivers. And keep in mind, this is going to be a best ball format. So we're not going to have access to go to the waiver wire and stream the quarterback position. Instead, every starting quarterback will be drafted here because we're going through 3 rounds. Now, because we don't have to submit a starting lineup every single week, what we're actually going to end up doing is we're going to take 3 quarterbacks and hope that they churn through, and we hope that we get spike weeks from one quarterback one week, the second quarterback the next, the third quarterback last. Like if we go through and we take guys like Ben Roethlisberger, Matt Ryan, and then say we also throw in someone like Matthew Stafford's not there, Trevor Lawrence. Just if we take those 3 crappy quarterbacks later on, while yes, individually they may all be very bad, but if you take the highest of the 3 every single week, you can maybe put together just mid quarterback 1 production. So that's going to be the strategy that we implement with this team. I actually like this team way more than the team we had yesterday. Roger coming out says, Mason, you Giga Chad. I don't know what that means, but I got into the championship first year watching you start Waller or Dawson Knox and safe to drop Cooper for Antonio Brown. Yes, I would drop Amari Cooper for Antonio Brown, as crazy as that sounds. And here, if we're looking at Darren Waller or Dawson Knox, if Darren Waller plays, you play Darren Waller. I know he's frustrating. I understand that he's been very up and down so far this season. At the end of the day, he is a tight end that was averaging 9 targets a game. And if you can have access to a tight end averaging 9 targets a game, you have to go through, jam him into the starting lineup. Okay, so now Rashad Bateman goes to the 904. Okay, so we're going to be pulling this up. And you know what? We're going to go for our guy. I mean, we went through, we drafted Brandon Ayuk. Let's get honestly, I'm going to have to order a Trey Lance jersey for this next season because I can tell you right now, there will be nobody higher on Trey Lance than I will be. I will be drafting Trey Lance in almost every single league, knowing this is someone that's going to have that access to elite level rushing upside. Not only elite level rushing upside, but at the same time, a very high floor given the situation that he'll be stepping into. So we're going to be drafting Trey Lance here as our quarterback 1. I mean, I think that Trey Lance could finish as the quarterback 1 overall this season. And I know that's crazy to say. I'm not necessarily saying that he's going to be there from a talent perspective in the NFL, but I mean, if we're talking a fantasy football perspective where Jalen Hurts was a mid quarterback 1 here, I think that there's no reason to assume that Trey Lance can't do that. Okay, so now Ashton says, do you think 8 teams or 16 playoffs are better for a 10-team league? If you're in a 10-team league, you cannot have an 8-team playoff. If you have an 8-team playoff in a 10-team league, really, that makes it where the regular season doesn't matter at all. You either need to do a 6-team playoff or a 4-team playoff. I mean, both are significantly better options than what you would actually have with a 8-team. Calcium Oxide says you don't have a Trey Lance jersey. Sadly, I do not. I do need to get one, though. I need to get a Trey Lance jersey. Okay, so you got Cortland Sutton, Corey Davis at the 908, the 909. Let me go through and let's check out the overall draft board and see if any listeners to the stream have intriguing looking drafts so far. So here you had one Autumn Leaf deciding to grab an elite tight end, an elite quarterback, 1 wide receiver through the first 5 rounds. So at running back, he has Jonathan Taylor, Michael Carter, and Chris Carson. At quarterback, he has the combination of Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. Tight end, he has George Kittle. Wide receiver, he has Lamb, Renfro, and Brandon Cooks. So he should have the quarterback 1. I mean, he should have a top 3 quarterback at the minimum every single week when he takes 2 quarterbacks this early. Should have a top 3 tight end every single week as well, assuming that George Kittle manages to stay healthy. It's really, can we get there with the running back production? This looks similar to a team I drafted yesterday. Honestly, I didn't really like the team too much we drafted yesterday. And now this next team, Dark Horse, took Derrick Henry, Leonard Fournette, Alexander Madison at RB. At wide receiver, Keenan Allen, T. Higgins, Devonta Smith, Adam Thielen. Looks like a very balanced team. I don't necessarily think there's too much to discuss there. Luke has Najee Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, Chase Edmonds, Darrell Henderson at running back. A weak running back core has the elite tight end quarterback stack with Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson. Clearly went for that when they decided to take Mark Andrews in the third, because they decided to take Lamar Jackson over both Kyler Murray and Josh Allen, who were significantly ahead of him in ADP. So this was planned out, you could tell. Wide receiver, very thin at receiver. I just think taking like Ramondre Stevenson and Chase Edmonds in this range of wide receiver, I think this is the dead zone where there's no way in hell you can be taking running backs here. Like outside of that, I like the draft. Just the issue is to take a running back here is so minus EV, like Ramondre Stevenson versus Michael Thomas. I mean, even Chase Edmonds versus Brandon Ayuk. They're just not in the same ballpark. You wouldn't be surprised if Ramondre Stevenson you wouldn't be surprised if New England brings in another running back this offseason, and Ramondre Stevenson's the running back 3 on the depth chart, and he's going before Devonta Smith. Like, the issue is just this is such a dead zone for running back, and this is really where you need to be grabbing your wide receivers. That's why we decided to reach on a running back a little bit beforehand. Let's get our picks back up yet again. Okay, so we got Rashad Penny at the 10:07. Obviously, we're kind of happy to see these running backs going off the board. We nailed this draft. I'm going to come out here and say it. We have the best draft here. It's not close. Yeah, we killed this draft. Yesterday, we tried something different, and yesterday, we clearly made mistakes. And I'm happy that we are able to learn from those mistakes now. And yeah, we're going to go through. We're going to take a tight end that is very young, should continue to get better. Let's take Noah Fant here in the 10th. We're going to take Noah Fant as our tight end 1. So our team right now, quarterback, we have Trey Lance. At running back, we have Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones, David Montgomery, Travis Etienne. A lot of guaranteed touches. At wide receiver, we have Mike Evans, Michael Thomas, Brandon Ayuk, Chase Claypool. At tight end, we have Noah Fant as well. Love this team. Okay, so let's go through and let's check out some other rosters. So King Tanner after us took Kupp, Chase, Ridley, Amari, Jerry Jeudy at wide receiver. So one of the better wide receiver cores in this league. At running back, he has Antonio Gibson, Melvin Gordon, Ronald Jones to try to piece together the running back production. An elite level quarterback with Kyler. This would be a team that I would actually really like once we get closer to the NFL season. Like, I think this is close to the roster construction that I'm probably going to be chasing once we're just say in August. Just anchor running back, then beat everybody else down at wide receiver. That's going to be the predictable position on a week-to-week basis. Grab your elite level quarterback, grab a respectable tight end, and then take shots on running backs later on. Now, the issue is neither Melvin Gordon or Ronald Jones have a contract at this point. So to go through and to try to find those running backs you want to take shots on in this range is going to be really hard. I remember last year, this is where you had guys like Leonard Fournette. This is where you had players like Chase Edmonds, I apologize, was going closer to the 7th round. This is where you had someone like James Conner. This is where you had someone like Ronald Jones, Zach Moss, Devin Singletary was going a little bit after, but you could take shots on those running backs knowing the situation that they would be in. At this point, I think it's a little bit harder to do that. So I think that's a strategy I really like once we get closer to the season. Right now, however, I don't necessarily know if I'm a massive fan of it. Okay, now at the 11:04, we're definitely going wide receiver here, Devontae Parker. So it's going to come down between the combination of Tyler Boyd and Kenny Golladay for me. Golladay, this is someone that I really liked last year, but, you're getting a massive discount on him now. He does have a monstrous contract as well. I know he can't stay healthy either. You know what? We're going to take Golladay as our wide receiver 5. I think he could come through with some spike weeks. I know Galladay's been very bad as of late, but keep in mind he's been playing with Mike Glennon and Jake Fromm. So we're going to go through and we're going to take him here. And now let's go through and let's get to the next roster to look at. This is going to be from Soap Stars. Decides to go running back at the beginning with Javonte Williams, J.K. Dobbins. From there, takes another shot on Rashad Penny at the end. Keep in mind, you don't have access to the waiver wire here. Instead, you're going to have to go through and you're going to have one roster throughout the entire season. That's why you have 20 rounds here, and you're going to see us drafting some really hideous players. Wide receiver, DeAndre Hopkins, Michael Pittman, Mike Williams, Robert Woods, a strong tight end, a couple strong quarterbacks. I think this is a very balanced team. Now, Dawson, McCaffrey, Zeke, Gaskin, Hubbard. That's another very balanced team. Not much to discuss. Great value with Dak Prescott in the 8th. T-Scar, Kamara, Kareem Hunt, James Conner. See, this is another running back that, of course, I mean, if you knew that he was guaranteed to go back to Arizona, you probably would be really excited about drafting James Conner in the 6th round. I think it was a clear inefficiency in the market with where he was going last year based on the hidden handcuff upside that he had if Chase Edmonds went down, and at the same time, the touchdown upside he had on a week-to-week basis regardless. But here to go through and take him in the 6th when we simply don't know the kind of team that he's going to be on, we don't know what other running backs are going to be in his backfield. I think that's going to be a very aggressive range when you kind of know what you're going to get with Tyler Lockett. You know what you're going to get with Amari Cooper. That's why we're probably going to be avoiding like this tier of James Conner. Like the perfect example is, would you rather go through and draft Josh Jacobs, who you know will be the starting running back for the Las Vegas Raiders next year based on the contract and the team investment into him? Would you rather have the combination of Josh Jacobs and Tyler Lockett, or the combination of DK Metcalf, James Conner? In my opinion, I think the clear answer is going to be the Josh Jacobs, Tyler Lockett connection. Now, Juice, with our next roster, got Dalvin, Jacobs, A.J. Dillon, Miles Sanders. I actually like this team. I think that this team maybe did a better job than I did, because I think when they're taking running backs here, they're not necessarily out of the dead zone just yet, because with Miles Sanders, I think you can safely, I don't want to say safely make the argument, but you could easily make the argument that he has a better shot at being a starting running back in his own backfield next year than any other running back in this range. Also, A.J. Dillon in the 5th, I'm going to be fine with that value. So I think this is a team that's honestly kind of similar to ours. If you just go through and you say swap out Aaron Jones to A.J. Dillon, Justin Jefferson to Michael Thomas, I mean, I think that it's kind of in the same range. I mean, you are hammering in those running backs early. You have 4 running backs through the first 6 rounds, and you're picking up some value here with the Miles Sanders, who is under contract. Then you take your Allen Robinson at the 709, get Corey Davis at the 909, so some wide receiver depth, Pat Freiermuth at the 804. Yeah, see, my issue is I don't necessarily think I agree with this Pat Freiermuth selection. Like, I think I would probably prefer the combination of one of these elite level quarterbacks, like, say, Dak Prescott and Noah Fant, compared to Pat Freiermuth and Kirk Cousins. Yeah, to go through and take Tannehill again. Okay, so let's see what Isaac has. Okay, so he went through, he got that Chiefs stack at the beginning, got Tyreek, Kelsey, Mahomes. Coming out of that, is he been able to add any Chiefs? Probably not. There are no Chiefs going in this range. Outside of that, looks like a very balanced roster. I don't necessarily think there's too much to discuss here. I'd imagine that he hammers in wide receivers after those next few rounds. Let's pull up what we're going to have here. Obviously, Julio Jones falling like a rock. Julio Jones, this is someone that you actually, in my opinion, have to be concerned with the injuries with, given the fact that, I mean, they're clear soft tissue injuries that continue to linger over and over again. Okay, so J.D. McKissick, the 1206, Kenneth Gainwell, the 1207. I honestly kind of like to see those running backs go off the board. We're probably going to be taking a quarterback with this selection. Because keep in mind, when we take Trey Lance here, we're probably going to be taking 3 quarterbacks whenever we decided to load up on those stud wide receivers and running backs earlier on, and we decided to pass on that tier guys like Kyler Murray. Okay, so let's see where King Tanner decides to go. Okay, he decides to go Curtis Samuel. Okay, so yeah, wide receiver, I'm not necessarily liking any of these wide receivers here. I mean, they're fine, but I would be okay with any of them so they can make it to our next pick. At quarterback, we're probably actually going to end up going with... Let's just take Derek Carr. I don't have a preference here, and if we don't have a preference, let's just take the player that's higher in ADP. It is what it is. I mean, with Tua Tagovailoa, I think he would be the answer if there wasn't the outside chance that he was getting traded this next offseason. Ed coming out says, start 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers in a flex. We got Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley, Miles Sanders, Sony Michel, Mike Evans, Michael Carter, Cooper Kupp, and Dalvin Cook. Okay, so obviously you're starting Cooper Kupp. Don't need me to tell you that. And I probably would go through and just start A.J. Brown, because the issue is you're not going to have the clarity with Tyreek Hill or Mike Evans by the time we get to that Thursday game with A.J. Brown. So yeah, you're going to have to, you're just going to have to start A.J. Brown. We don't know if Tyreek's going to be off the COVID list or not. So we're going to go Kupp, A.J. Brown at wide receiver. At running back, we're going to go with the combination of Saquon Barkley and Miles Sanders. And then for the flex spot, we're going to hold off hope that we're getting either Tyreek Hill or Mike Evans to play this week. And if that's not going to be the case, we're going to go with Sony Michel. Okay, so DJ Chark at the 12-12. See, we're probably going to be grabbing our 6th wide receiver. Let me see. So Mac Jones went directly after our pick at the 12-10. Okay, one Autumn Leaf has a balanced roster. They go Raheem Mostert. Yeah, this is why we need to be avoiding those running backs. Why we need to be drafting those running backs at the beginning so we can afford to avoid these running backs here that could just be dead roster spots from the get-go. Guess dark horse, another very balanced team. This team decided to go 3 tight ends. Interesting. Julio Jones. Yeah, so we're going to grab Tua Tagovailoa. Let's go Tua. Let's get our 3 quarterbacks in here from a best ball format. I'll feel comfortable with that trio of QBs. So let's go back to going through and checking out our next team. This is going to be JN. Isaac says it's his first 2022 draft. Yeah, my friend, I've had the luxury of being able to draft, I believe, like 10 of these now on the live stream. So we made a lot of mistakes in our last one that I think we kind of fixed in this one. But JN, Mixon, Chubb, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, fine with those first 3 picks. I think it would be definitely a spot I want to go Cam Akers if we have the fantasy football playoffs, knowing that, we could have that elite level ceiling for Cam Akers at the end of the year that Clyde Edwards-Helaire may just simply not possess. But if instead it's going to be something that you just kind of need to be able to go through and get points at the beginning of the season, there I could understand taking the running back that's in the guaranteed situation with Kansas City next year. And then James Robinson at the 602. I actually prefer Miles Sanders over James Robinson at the 602. Then Terry McLaurin, Hollywood Brown, really like the Hollywood pick. Gallup, fine with. Dawson Knox at the 802. Yeah, I don't really like this Dawson Knox selection. I think whenever you're getting tight ends like Zach Ertz, Noah Fant, Dalton Schultz in the 10th round, this is definitely the way this went wrong, JN. I would have instead gone with one of the elite quarterbacks. And of course, hindsight's 2020, but this is the same mistake I made in yesterday's live stream. In yesterday's live stream, we went through and we took a tight end way too early whenever we paired him with Darren Waller, and then we kind of were able to take advantage of the tight end value we had a little bit later on. I think that this is honestly probably a range where we should just be avoiding tight ends in the draft, similar to how we were avoiding the running backs here. But yeah, I think going with one of these elite quarterbacks and then instead grabbing, say, someone like Noah Fant, Zach Ertz, or Dalton Schultz at the 1002 over Justin Fields, I probably would have preferred to see that. Rondale Moore, I'm fine with. Jalen Hurts, I'm fine with. With Jalen Hurts, obviously, the question is, does he have the job the entire season? But, here that's already kind of baked in because obviously on a per-game basis, this is a great pick with Jalen Hurts. Every game that we know he starts is going to be way better than these options right above him. And then Cole Kmet at the 1202. Okay, Irv Smith Jr. at the 1310. Great pick with Irv Smith Jr. Will Fuller, really like the Will Fuller pick in the 13th. Carson Wentz at the 13-12. Hopefully we get some more quarterbacks going off because we cannot draft any more quarterbacks here. Actually, we should probably switch this over. Jan says he doesn't think the Dawson Knox selection is a mistake. Let me know what y'all would prefer. Would you prefer the combination of Dak Prescott and your pick of one of these tight ends, Dalton Schultz, Zach Ertz, and Noah Fant? Would you prefer that combo? Dak Prescott and one of these tight ends, your choice, or Dawson Knox and one of your choice of these quarterbacks? I definitely think I prefer getting the quarterback in this range and waiting a little bit longer on tight end. Dan Arnold at the 1404. Zach Moss at the 1405. I actually kind of like this Zach Moss selection compared to the other running backs that he's going behind. Let's pick this back up. Okay, wide receiver. Where are we going? Daniel Jones goes to the 1406. What quarterbacks are available? I would say Zach Wilson's probably the only guy you know is going to start the entire year. Okay, so Trey Sermon at the 1407. Honestly, Sermon would have been a player I would have considered if we didn't need to take a wide receiver. I think we have to take a wide receiver with this construction. I'm fine with it. We'll take Tim Patrick. I don't like it knowing that you're going to get KJ Hamler back next year, but we're getting him 30 picks behind his ADP. And we're getting him as our wide receiver 6. We just need guys that we know are going to be playing. Isaac coming out, calling out the Baker and Jarvis Landry stack. Baker Mayfield doesn't have a contract next year for the Cleveland Browns. Let me see what the Jarvis Landry deal is. I think Jarvis Landry doesn't really have any guaranteed money. I think this team could easily look to move on from Landry. Yeah, because he signed a 5-year, $75 million contract. They could save essentially Oh, yeah, I'll tell you right now, Jarvis Landry will not be with this team in 2022. Yeah, Jarvis Landry is breaking news here. Unless Jarvis Landry signs a new contract, unless Jarvis Landry restructures this deal, he is not going to be with the Cleveland Browns in 2022. He's owed $16.5 million. And of course, if $12 million of that's guaranteed, then he's going to be there. They're not cutting him to save $4 million, but $1.5 million is guaranteed. So they can save $15 million by cutting Jarvis Landry. That's going to be something they do. They would, I guarantee you, prefer to go through and give $10 million of that to Michael Gallup and then pocket the $5 million for an offensive lineman. And Jeffrey coming out says safe to drop Leonard Fournette, pick up Amara St. Brown or Russell Gage on waivers. I would say so. I mean, knowing that you probably only have 1 to 2 weeks left of your fantasy football playoffs and Leonard Fournette's looking like he's going on the IR, yeah, it should be safe to drop him. I would definitely pick up Amara St. Brown, however. Okay. We're probably going to make this, I think this is probably a good range to call these drafts about in the 15th round to be done with these, because once we're getting to the players like KG Osborne, Sterling Shepard, Cole Beasley, I mean, the players themselves that you're selecting aren't going to matter as much, and what matters a little bit more is just the roster construction you're pursuing. So here, let me go through and talk about what we are going to do in the rest of the draft to construct this roster. When we take 4 running backs in a row at the very beginning, I think that we actually put ourselves in a position where we don't necessarily have to continue to hammer them in. I think we could maybe only take 1 more running back in this draft, and that's based on where he falls. I definitely think we're not going to go with 4. We're definitely going to grab a 5th. Okay, so now it depends. What wide receiver do we want here? Very similar. I hate to be this boring. Actually, do we want Robert Tonyan? We probably want to grab Robert Tonyan, no? Yeah, we need 3 tight ends. We're going to grab Robert Tonyan for one of them here. Thinking about taking Marvin Jones. But outside of this, from a roster construction standpoint, what we are going to be doing the rest of this draft is we will take 1 more tight end, 1 more running back based on where the value presents itself in the next 5 rounds. And then the other 3 picks are going to be wide receiver. When in doubt, you take a wide receiver in a best ball format, knowing that they have a little bit more volatility, but those spikes are going to be higher and they can actually get into your starting lineup. And I think that should be it for the draft. Of course, thank you all so much for everybody coming out here and hanging out with us. And I know that y'all probably upset we didn't get to get this link out in the live chat early enough, but I promise you, go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. We're going to be doing these a ton. Mario says, hey Mason, play which 3 wide receivers this week? Cap PPR: Adams, Jefferson, Samuel, Renfro, St. Brown, Christian Kirk, or Gabriel Davis. We're going to be going Adams, Jefferson is easily. We don't need to really discuss that. I think assuming we have no DeAndre Swift, TJ Hawkinson, we go with Amon-Ra St. Brown. If DeAndre Swift plays, instead we'll most likely pivot over to go Christian Kirk, assuming that you have... Actually, no. Is that Deebo Samuel? If that's Deebo Samuel, go Deebo Samuel. For a second, I was thinking that was Curtis Samuel. No, you just go Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, and Deebo Samuel. That's pretty damn easy. Jan says, highlight the last team you missed them. Okay, so let's go through. Let's check out this last team. It's going to be Cam the Man, starting off 3 running backs here. Then goes Jalen Waddle, Elijah Moore, Hawkinson, Rodgers. Okay. The Rodgers pick kind of threw me off because it was in the 7th. If it was here, that would be completely fine. Yeah, so that's a good pick with Rodgers. What wide receiver? I like that Hawkinson in the beginning of the 6th. I actually really like the combination of both those picks. They looked a little out of place, but no, I agree. I think they're values. Odell, Juju, like both those values. Sony Michel, where's Sony Michel going in the range of running backs? Maybe we prefer Devin Singletary instead. Wide receiver... Actually, no, Devin Singletary goes beforehand. I apologize. You're looking at this range of running backs. Yeah, Sony Michel is going to be a guy I prefer over them. As long as you're passing up any significant wide receivers, so I'd be fine with that as well. Jacoby Myers compared to Curtis. Yeah, Jacoby Myers is whatever. Doesn't really matter. Carson Wentz, same thing. Kenyon Drake, like the value. I really like this team. I really like this team from Cam the Man. Okay, and of course, thank y'all so much for being a part of the flock and supporting the channel. Hope y'all enjoyed this live stream, and I hope that we get you out in a draft with us tomorrow night. If not, you can go get in one of those public drafts. And yeah, wishing you all the best of luck this week. And